The Galactic Federation's inspection team arrived in Earth's orbit, expecting to see a heavily fortified world. Every advanced species in the galaxy protected their homeworld with massive energy shields, planetary defense grids, and war fleets. But as the inspectors scanned Earth, they found nothing. No shields, no orbital weapons, no fleets standing guard. Earth was wide open. Ambassador Korak, a reptilian Silari with sharp golden eyes, clenched his claws on the armrest of his seat. "This cannot be right," he muttered. "Are they hiding their defenses? A cloaking system, perhaps?" His assistant, a thin insectoid named Velrix, checked his datapad nervously. "Negative, sir. We have scanned the entire system. There is nothing. Just civilian satellites, outdated space stations, and a few patrol ships. Earth has no planetary defenses." Korak's eyes narrowed. No intelligent species would leave themselves so vulnerable. Something was wrong. Either the humans were hiding their technology, or they were fools. He refused to believe the latter. The inspection team's shuttle descended into Earth's atmosphere, heading toward a towering city of glass and steel. They were greeted with polite smiles, but Korak could not shake the feeling that those smiles were hiding something. Inside a grand conference hall, Earth's Defense Council awaited them. The human leader, Director Harris, leaned forward with a calm expression. "Ambassador Korak, welcome to Earth. I understand you have concerns." Korak wasted no time. "We have scanned your planet. There are no shields, no orbital defenses, no planetary cannons. Earth is completely exposed. Explain yourselves." Harris smiled slightly. "We don't need them." The simple answer made Korak's scales bristle. "You don't need them. Do you understand the risks? A single fleet could wipe out your entire civilization. Why do you leave yourselves unprotected?" Harris rested his hands on the table and looked Korak directly in the eyes. His voice remained calm, but there was a dangerous edge beneath it. "Ambassador, most species think of war as a matter of defense. They build walls, shields, and fortresses to protect themselves." He leaned forward. "Humans don't fight like that." Velrix twitched his antennae. "Then how do you fight?" Harris pressed a button, and a holographic map of the Milky Way appeared. Red dots blinked across the map, locations of human military bases scattered far beyond Earth. "We do not build walls," Harris said. "We do not wait for war to come to us. We take the war to the enemy." Korak's eyes widened slightly. "You go on the offensive." Harris nodded. "The best defense is not to wait behind shields. The best defense is to make sure the enemy never gets close." Velrix shivered. "But what if a fleet attacks tomorrow?" Harris didn't even blink. "Then they won't have a fleet the day after." A heavy silence fell over the room. Korak had seen many war strategies, but nothing like this. Humans did not defend their world because they had no intention of letting anyone attack it in the first place. It was not Earth that was unprotected. It was the rest of the galaxy. And at that moment, Korak realized something terrifying. Humanity was not defenseless. It was hunting. And anyone foolish enough to strike at Earth would learn the true cost of their mistake. The room remained silent after Director Harris's words. The air felt heavy, charged with something Korak could not define. His sharp reptilian eyes studied the human leader, searching for any sign of deception, but Harris remained calm, his expression unreadable. Korak's claws tapped against the polished surface of the conference table. "You expect me to believe," he said slowly, "that your entire defense strategy is based on attacking first?" Harris tilted his head slightly. "Not exactly. We don't attack first. We prepare first. We ensure that if anyone thinks about attacking us, they quickly regret it." Korak exchanged a glance with Velrix, his insectoid assistant. The Xelari were warriors, a species bred for combat. They understood strategy, preparation, and the necessity of overwhelming force. But even the Xelari did not leave their homeworld undefended. Velrix clicked his mandibles anxiously. "This is madness," he muttered. "You leave yourself wide open. Even the mightiest predator does not leave its den unguarded." Harris leaned back in his chair, his fingers steepled together. "Perhaps. But tell me something, Ambassador. What happens when a predator realizes that hunting a certain prey always ends in disaster?" Korak narrowed his eyes. "It learns to avoid that prey." Harris nodded. "Exactly." He gestured to the holographic map still floating above the table. "Everywhere you look, you will find evidence of our approach. We don't wait for threats to come to us. We eliminate them before they become a problem." Velrix's mandibles twitched. "That is a dangerous way to exist." Harris smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "The galaxy is a dangerous place." Korak could not deny that. He had seen the rise and fall of empires, watched entire species disappear because they failed to prepare for war. He had assumed the humans were fools, but now he wasn't so sure. Still, he needed proof. "You claim Earth is safe because of this strategy," he said, "but I have seen no evidence of it. Show me." Harris tapped a command into his datapad. The holographic map shifted, zooming in on a distant system on the galactic fringe. A series of recordings played, taken from surveillance drones and long-range sensors. Korak's eyes widened as he watched. A Xilari war fleet, one he recognized, was caught in battle against a smaller human force. By all logic, the humans should have lost. They were outnumbered 3-1. And yet, the battle was not a battle. It was a slaughter. Human ships moved with terrifying precision, weaving through enemy fire like they knew exactly where the next shot would land. Xilari ships exploded one after another, their formations crumbling in mere minutes. The humans never hesitated. They didn't wait to see if the enemy would retreat. They struck with ruthless efficiency, eliminating threats with a cold, calculated brutality that sent a chill through Korak's scales. The recording ended. Harris looked at Korak. "That was one of your own fleets, Ambassador. They thought we were weak. They thought we couldn't fight back. They were wrong." Korak felt his throat tighten. That fleet had vanished nearly a year ago. The official report claimed they had encountered an unknown force and been lost. The truth was far worse. Velrix's voice was barely above a whisper. "How did they know? The fleet's tactics, their weak points, it's as if they were anticipating every move." Harris tapped the side of his head. "Combat reflexes." Korak frowned. "Explain." Harris exhaled slowly. "Humans evolved in a world full of dangers. Our ancestors weren't the strongest or the fastest, but they were the best at surviving. Our reflexes are hardwired for combat. We don't think, we react. We read patterns, predict movements, and adapt in an instant. That's why we don't need a planetary defense grid. By the time you realize we're a threat, it's already too late." Korak clenched his jaw. This was not what he expected. He had come to Earth to assess a weakness. Instead, he had found something far more terrifying. A species that did not wait. A species that did not defend. A species that hunted. And in that moment, he realized the truth. Earth was not unprotected. Earth was the most dangerous trap in the galaxy. And anyone who made the mistake of attacking it would never return. Korak had always believed himself to be a master of war. He had studied countless battle strategies, dissected the rise and fall of empires, and witnessed firsthand the brutality of intergalactic conflicts. But never had he encountered a species so reckless, so terrifyingly unpredictable as humanity. He sat in silence, replaying the footage of the Xilari fleet's destruction in his mind. It didn't make sense. The humans had no superior firepower, no advanced shielding, no overwhelming numbers. Yet they had annihilated a force that should have crushed them. "Your tactics," Korak finally said, his voice measured but tight, "are not normal. You fight as if you already know the outcome, as if you've lived the battle before it even starts." Harris gave a small, knowing smile. "That's not far from the truth." Korak narrowed his eyes. "Explain." Harris leaned forward slightly, his gaze unyielding. Human combat reflexes are not just about speed. They're about instinct, pattern recognition, the ability to predict what comes next, even before the enemy realizes it themselves. He tapped a button on the table, bringing up another holographic display. We don't just fight in the moment, we fight in the future. The display flickered to life, showing human soldiers in combat simulations. Korak watched closely, his keen mind analyzing their movements. At first, they seemed erratic, unpredictable. But as he continued watching, he saw it. Subtle shifts in their stance, rapid micro-adjustments before an attack even came. They weren't reacting. They were anticipating. We see the smallest changes, Harris continued. A flick of a muscle, a shift in weight, the angle of a weapon. Our brains process it in milliseconds, and before the enemy knows what's happening, we've already acted. Velrix, who had remained unnervingly quiet until now, clicked his mandibles. That is unnatural. Harris chuckled. It's survival. Korak clenched his claws together, his mind racing. He had spent years studying human history before coming to Earth. He had read about their wars, their struggles, their brutal efficiency in battle. But he had always assumed that their victories were due to technology, strategy, or sheer numbers. Now he understood the truth. The humans themselves were the weapon. You don't have defenses because you don't need them, Korak muttered, realization dawning on him. Harris nodded. And because the best way to win a fight is to make sure it never happens. Korak exhaled slowly. He could see it now. Earth was not weak. It was bait, a carefully laid trap, designed to lull enemies into a false sense of security. No planetary shields, no visible fleet guarding the system. Just an open world, seemingly unprotected. And the moment an enemy struck, humanity's true nature would be revealed. A species that could not be caught off guard. A species that did not fight fair. A species that turned war into an execution. Velrix shifted uncomfortably beside him. Ambassador, if this is true, then no one in the galaxy is safe. Korak met Harris's gaze. That is exactly what they want us to believe. Harris gave him a slow, deliberate nod. Because if you believe it, then maybe, just maybe, you'll think twice before making the mistake of testing us. The room fell silent. Korak knew what had to be done. He had to warn the Federation. But deep in his core, a disturbing thought crept into his mind. What if the warning came too late? What if humanity was already planning its next move? And worst of all, what if no one listened until it was too late? Korak sat in the dimly lit communication chamber, staring at the encrypted message before him. His claws tapped anxiously against the console as he hesitated. Every instinct told him to send the warning. Send it now, before it was too late. Yet, another part of him knew the truth. The Federation would not listen. They'd never listened until the blood had already been spilled. Taking a deep breath, he activated the transmission. A holographic figure flickered to life in front of him. The stern face of High Commander Taver of the Galactic Federation's War Council. Korak. Taver greeted, his tone neutral but impatient. This is unexpected. Has Earth agreed to negotiations? Korak hesitated for half a second before shaking his head. No, Commander. It's worse than that. We have misunderstood Earth's true nature. Tavor raised a brow. Enlighten me. Korak clenched his jaw. He had spent his life in politics, navigating the tangled webs of power and diplomacy. But this was different. This was something primal, something terrifying. Earth's lack of defenses is not a weakness, he said slowly, choosing his words carefully. It is a trap. They do not build defense grids because they do not need them. The humans themselves are the defense. Tavor scoffed. What nonsense is this? You speak as if humans are some kind of living weapon. Korak's grip tightened on the edge of the console. That's exactly what they are. Tavor's expression darkened. Elaborate. Korak activated the footage from his meeting with Captain Harris. The holographic display shifted, showing human soldiers in training, their movements almost unnatural in their precision. The way they anticipated attacks before they happened. The way their bodies reacted before their minds even processed the danger. They do not react to threats, Korak said. They predict them. They see the smallest movement, the tiniest shift in stance, and in less than a second, they already know how the fight will end. Tavor watched in silence, his expression unreadable. Then, after a long pause, he leaned forward. So what? We have superior numbers. We have the most advanced fleets in the galaxy. A few fast reflexes will not save them when our warships rain fire upon their world. Korak exhaled sharply. He had expected this arrogance. That is exactly what the auxiliary thought, he said coldly. You saw what happened to them. Tavor frowned but said nothing. Korak continued, his voice rising slightly. The humans let the auxiliary attack. They allowed them to believe Earth was vulnerable. And when the moment was right, they ended them. Not with superior technology, not with overwhelming force, but with something far worse. Tavor narrowed his eyes. And what is that? Korak leaned forward, his tone deadly serious. A war without hesitation. A war fought on pure, calculated instinct. By the time our ships fire, their soldiers have already planned how to kill us. Silence hung between them. For the first time, a flicker of uncertainty passed across Tavor's face. Korak seized the moment. We cannot afford to make the same mistake. If we provoke Earth, we will not be fighting a conventional war. We will be fighting something we do not understand, something we cannot prepare for. Tavor's jaw tightened, but there was hesitation now. You are asking me to back down from confrontation with a species that has no standing fleet, no planetary shields. I am asking you, Korak said, his voice like steel, to consider whether the Federation is truly prepared for a war where every battle is lost before it even begins. Tavor exhaled, his gaze dropping slightly. Then, just as quickly, his expression hardened. You have given your warning, Ambassador, he said stiffly. I will take it under advisement. The transmission cut out. Korak remained frozen, staring at the empty space where Tavor's image had been. He already knew what would happen next. The Federation would not listen. They would believe in their fleets, their weapons, their numbers. And when the war finally came, they would realize, far too late, why Earth had never needed a defense grid. Because humanity had always been on the offensive, and the Federation had just walked into their hands. The Galactic Federation's War Council chamber was filled with the low hum of whispered discussions. Admirals, generals, and high-ranking officials gathered in a semicircle around the massive holographic display, where a three-dimensional model of Earth spun slowly. The tension in the air was palpable. High Commander Tavor stood at the center, his expression unreadable. His claws tapped rhythmically against the control panel as he watched the assembled leaders, gauging their moods. He had listened to Korak's warning, but only as a formality. Earth had no defense grid, no planetary shields, no signs of heavy military installations. To him, that only meant one thing: an easy target. This is a waste of time, Admiral Celeron of the Threxian fleet grumbled. His dark, reptilian eyes gleamed with impatience. We have studied their world extensively. Their technology is barely above primitive. If we strike first, we can end this before it begins. General Varish, a towering member of the Kargith species, nodded in agreement. We outnumber them 100 to 1. What can a few instinct-driven warriors do against orbital bombardment? Tavor exhaled, shaking his head. You are both missing the point. We are not dealing with technology alone. We are dealing with the unknown. We have underestimated species before, and it has cost us dearly. Admiral Celeron scoffed. You sound like that trembling ambassador, Korak. He fears a race of flesh and bone as if they were gods. Tavor's gaze darkened, but before he could respond, a new voice cut through the chamber. We do not need to debate. The room fell silent. All eyes turned toward Admiral Sorvik, a veteran of countless battles. Unlike the others, he did not underestimate Earth. He had studied humanity's conflicts. He had seen the patterns in their history, how they adapted, how they survived, and most importantly, how they won. The humans have left us no choice, Sorvik continued, stepping forward. We have issued warnings. We have given ultimatums, and yet they refuse to acknowledge our authority. He paused, letting the words sink in. We cannot afford to look weak. A murmur of agreement spread through the chamber. Tavor nodded slowly. Then it is decided. He turned to his officers. Begin the first strike preparations. We will target their communications and military installations. If they wish to fight, we will show them what true war looks like. With that, the fate of Earth was sealed. The first strike. Deep in Earth's military command center, General Nathan Carter stood motionless, watching the satellite feeds. The Federation ships had begun their movement, massive dreadnoughts and battlecruisers emerging from warp just outside Earth's orbit. The sheer size of the fleet was overwhelming, enough to strike fear into any rational strategist. But Carter was not afraid. They took the bait. He muttered under his breath, his lips curling into a smirk. Beside him, Colonel Adams folded his arms. They think they're in control. Carter let out a slow breath. They never were. Humanity had known this day would come. They had studied the Federation's war strategies, analyzed their weaknesses, and prepared, not by building walls or shields, but by sharpening their minds and perfecting their response. The silence on the Federation's command bridge was deafening. Admiral Sorvik, once confident in the fleet's superiority, stood frozen as Earth's counterattack unfolded in ways he had never imagined. His officers scrambled, trying to regain control, but the chaos was spreading too fast. Ships were disappearing from the tactical map, not because they were retreating, but because they were being destroyed. They're inside our network. One of the engineers shouted. Our targeting systems are being overridden. Sorvik clenched his jaw. Impossible. Earth doesn't have eye warfare at this level. And yet, the evidence was right in front of him. The Federation had always assumed humans were behind in technology. Their ships were less advanced. Their weapons weren't as powerful. Their defenses were practically non-existent. But what the Federation had failed to see, what they had refused to acknowledge, was that humans never fought fair. They fought smart. Instead of relying on brute force, they had focused on tactics. Instead of building massive defensive stations, they had turned their entire planet into a battlefield. And now, the so-called invincible Federation fleet was learning what it meant to fight a species that had evolved for war. The trap closes. On board Earth's military command center, General Nathan Carter watched the operation unfold with icy precision. His officers were working at lightning speed, coordinating a response that had been years in the making. Enemy fleet is in full disarray, Colonel Adams reported. They still think this is an accident. They don't understand we let them walk into this. Carter exhaled slowly. They will soon. The first part of the plan had been simple. Lure the Federation into thinking Earth was weak. Let them believe there was no defense, no resistance. The second part was unfolding now, shutting down their ability to fight before they even realized what was happening. Launch the Reapers, Carter ordered. A silent confirmation swept across the command center. From hidden bases deep within Earth's crust, black ships rose into the sky. They were smaller than the Federation's warships, sleeker and faster. These weren't standard military vessels. These were humanity's monsters, stealth-coded, AI-assisted, and piloted by the deadliest warriors Earth had ever produced. They moved like shadows, slipping through the Federation's weakened lines. And then the real slaughter began. The Federation's worst nightmare. Aboard the Vanguard, one of the Federation's command carriers, Admiral Celeron watched his screens in horror. They're boarding us, a terrified officer reported. We can't stop them. Celeron spun toward his security chief. Then fight them, you fool. The officer's hands trembled. "You don't understand. They're already inside our secure zones. They're cutting through blast doors like paper. Our soldiers." He swallowed, voice breaking. "They're not just being killed. They're being hunted." Zelran felt his blood turn to ice. Federation soldiers were some of the best-trained warriors in the galaxy. But these weren't normal human soldiers. These were something else. Security feeds flickered to life, showing grainy footage of human operatives tearing through corridors, moving faster than should have been possible. They didn't fight with traditional military precision. No formations, no hesitation. Only instinct, raw and deadly. A squad of Federation soldiers tried to hold a choke point. In seconds, they were taken apart. The humans moved unpredictably, using cover in ways that defied standard combat doctrine. One soldier vaulted off a wall, twisting in midair to fire behind him. Another dropped low, rolling under enemy fire before slashing upward with a blade. Zelran recognized these tactics. This wasn't disciplined military strategy. This was something far older. This was predation. The Federation had walked into a fight against a species that didn't just wage war. They thrived in it. And now the Federation's greatest fleet was being picked apart piece by piece. A message to the galaxy. On Earth, Carter's expression didn't change as the reports came in. The enemy was breaking, their fleet crippled, their soldiers in full retreat. He turned to the communications officer. "Open a channel to the surviving Federation commanders." The officer nodded, and moments later, the broken voices of what remained of the Federation's leadership crackled through the speakers. "This is Admiral Sorvik," the voice said, shaky but still proud. "We acknowledge Earth's strength. We underestimated you." Carter leaned forward, voice calm, but filled with something darker. "No," he said, "you didn't underestimate us. You ignored history. You thought mercy was weakness. You thought because we didn't build walls, we had nothing to protect us." He let the silence hang before delivering the final blow. "But our defense was never a shield." He smiled coldly. "It was always the fact that no one who attacks us ever gets to leave." The channel cut off. Outside, the last Federation ships tried to flee. Earth's forces didn't let them. This war was over, and the galaxy would never dare question humanity's defenses again. The once mighty Federation fleet was no more. Ships that had once patrolled the galaxy with impunity now drifted as burning wreckage in Earth's orbit. The remnants of their forces, battered and broken, either surrendered or were hunted down with ruthless efficiency. The message was clear. Earth had no need for walls because its true defense was something far deadlier. But even as the battle came to an end, the true cost of the Federation's arrogance was only beginning to unfold. A galaxy in shock. News of the battle spread across the stars like wildfire. The Federation, the so-called rulers of the known galaxy, had suffered a humiliating defeat at the hands of a species they had dismissed as primitive. Broadcasts from neutral systems replayed footage of the battle, analyzing how the human forces had dismantled a superior fleet with almost surgical precision. The galaxy, once blind to humanity's capabilities, was now forced to see the truth. For years, other empires had asked why Earth had no massive defense stations, no planetary shield grids, no visible deterrents. The answer was now terrifyingly clear. Earth didn't need them. Because when humanity fought, they didn't defend, they destroyed. And now, the galaxy trembled at the thought of what Earth would do next. The surrender that never came. On what remained of the Federation's flagship, Admiral Sorvik stood amidst the ruins of his command deck. The lights flickered, consoles sparked, and the bodies of his officers lay where they had fallen. He had no illusions about the outcome. The Federation had lost. A transmission came through. The cold, unreadable face of General Nathan Carter appeared on the screen. Behind him, the Earth forces stood waiting, their ships holding formation like a pack of predators deciding whether to strike again. "This is over," Carter said simply. Sorvik swallowed his pride. He had no other choice. I will order the remaining forces to stand down. On behalf of the Federation. Carter's expression didn't change. You misunderstand, Admiral. We're not here to negotiate. Sorvik froze. But we surrender. We acknowledge your victory. Carter leaned forward slightly. You think surrender changes what you did? His voice was calm, but there was an edge to it. A promise of something terrible. Sorvik knew then. There would be no peace talks. No treaties. The Federation had broken every rule of war, had attacked those who offered only mercy. And now, Earth would not allow them the luxury of survival. This isn't war anymore, Carter continued. This is justice.